and welcome back to Football Made Simple.
Eric Cantona, Zinedine Zidane, Thierry Henry, Kylian Mbappe. Year after year for decades now, France seem to produce generational players, and they have firmly established themselves as a footballing powerhouse. In recent years, they have gotten to the final of the Euros and are the current world champions, and are ranked second in the world. And here's how you know France is doing something different. It's not just a strong first 11 or a golden generation. They could easily put out two first 11s who on paper you'd expect to at least go deep in a World Cup, and two more 11s after that you'd expect to at least get out of the group stages. This is before including players who could also have played for France but chose otherwise, for different reasons, like Raf Guerreiro, Kalidou Koulibaly, Aubameyang, Mahrez and Laporte. So how exactly do France produce such talents? Let's take a look.
And if you want to keep up with your favorite teams and players, check out the OneFootball app. It'll give you team and player stats, transfer news, and so much more. Absolutely free through the sponsored link in the description below.
When looking at France's performances at the Euros and the World Cup, there is a clear distinction. Before the 80s, France barely ever qualified for the Euros altogether, finishing fourth the one time they did. But after 1980, they qualified for each one, usually getting out of the group stages and winning it twice. A similar trend can be seen for the World Cup, where before the 80s, one third place finish was their best result. After that, they have won the whole thing twice. So what exactly changed? Like most revolutions, it came due to a period of sustained failure. France had just failed to qualify for 3 Euros in a row, and 2 of the last 3 World Cups. So, France's footballing body, the France Football Federation, knew that a complete revamp of the entire footballing structure was needed. The first step was establishing a national centre of excellence that would serve as a home base for the footballing heads and training some elite talents. So all the way back in 1972, the Institut National de Football, INF, was founded in Vichy, a first-of-its-kind national academy training mainly teens. But early on, the impact of the INF wasn't directly in developing players. After all, it takes time to see the impact. The most important thing they developed was the Professional Football Charter of 1973. They knew that one centre would never be enough to service an entire country, so in the Football Charter, they made it compulsory for professional French teams to have academies, immediately increasing the amount of players who had easy access to elite training environments. And at each of these academies, French clubs are hyper-focused on bringing in the best coaching talents that they can, knowing that by having the best coaches around, they will be able to produce better talents. This was just the tip of the iceberg, with the France Football Federation also working closely with the government to build 32 football schools across France. These are, in essence, schools with regular academic classes, but a big focus on football outside classroom hours. This once again expanded the potential talent pool being dealt with across the country. But perhaps the most important moment was when the France Football Federation decided to move the INF from Vichy to Greater Paris, Clairefontaine to be exact, and developed the famous Clairefontaine Centre, whose construction began in 1985 and was completed in 1988. One of the main advantages of this new location was the bigger talent pool that the INF could now cater to. At the time, Vichy had a population of just 27,000, compared to Clairefontaine, which could service the entire Île-de-France region, which had a population of around 10 million. And the facilities of the academy were state-of-the-art and well ahead of their time. They implemented a multi-pitch system with grass and synthetic variants, gyms, and sports science labs. And it was almost a boarding school situation, where selected recruits would stay at the academy throughout the week with 302 beds available, games rooms, libraries, and so much more. And one of the major forces in the development of Clairefontaine was former head coach Stefan Kovacs. Kovacs was inspired by training camps in his home country of Romania, which were free but quite intensive, with the focus being on developing individuals as best they could so that when put together they would be an effective team. So one of the key ingredients for Clairefontaine is that when selected, players did not have to pay, making it open for people from all kinds of backgrounds. So how do they select players and how do they operate it? When it comes to selecting players to attend, there are 3 basic requirements. They have to have French citizenship, they must be at least 13 when they enter, and they have to live and play within the Île-de-France region, although there is some wiggle room on this. From early ages until 12, players train primarily at the previously mentioned football schools and club academies. But once they turn 12, at their academy, they can apply to attend a trial versus players within their district. Each district will then select a few players to attend a 3-day trial at Clairefontaine. And from there, the INF officials will select a maximum of 22 players for the year. This means that only the best of the best are selected. But no system is perfect, and being so strict with their criteria means that late developers in terms of skill, like Payet and Griezmann, didn't make it, whilst Kanté was also deemed too small. But the players who are selected enter a tough regime. From Mondays to Fridays, players will stay at the academy to work on their schooling and training. And unlike other academies who are obsessed with, for example, a possession philosophy or a quick transition philosophy, the philosophy at Clairefontaine is to make each individual as good as they can be. So, elements within each player's individual game are worked on, such as their weak foot, movement, physicality, technical and tactical skills, mentality, and so much more. And although all youth teams use a 4-3-3, this is mainly because the formation can accommodate almost any type of players, rather than fulfill a certain philosophy. This focus on the individual may be why France is able to produce flair players who are able to express themselves. And once the players have spent Monday to Friday training, they are released for the weekend and can see their families, but also return to their parent clubs, allowing them to participate against other elite talents around the country. This training at Clairefontaine is reserved for players between 13 and 15, after which players are more heavily integrated into professional club systems as they look to take the next step. These methods have been an undoubted success, and several quality players have emerged from Clairefontaine. The most famous include William Gallas, Louis Saha, Hatem Ben Arfa, Matuidi, Nicolas Anelka, Benatia, Guerrero, Thierry Henry, and Kylian Mbappe. And the success of Clairefontaine has led to the France Football Federation creating 13 more elite academies in different regions, such as Dijon and Marseille, meaning it is extremely difficult for a talent to go unnoticed. And for those of you who also watched our videos on the English, Belgian, and German youth system, linked below, you will notice that these have a lot in common. And that is because all these footballing associations have at least somewhat been inspired by Clairefontaine. The difference is, the methods introduced by the France Football Federation in the 1970s have only been introduced to the other countries in the 2000s and 2010s, showing that France was some 30 to 40 years ahead of the curve. And while these pristine academies with elite coaches and many elite players do the job, that is not the only way of doing things. The banlieues, or suburbs just on the outskirts of major French cities, have also had major roles to play. These regions tend to have families of immigrant and less affluent backgrounds, and as a result, there are less recreational activities to partake in, and it will be harder for them to afford either way. And the France Football Federation and French government have done well, as they provide plenty of state-subsidized pitches dotted around the banlieues, as well as actual sports clubs with highly qualified coaches ready to teach willing learners. This means regardless of their economic status, can either play freeform football on a free-to-use pitch, honing their skills and freestyle flair, or join one of the academies when they wish to be more formal in their competition. Most commonly, players will combine both before stepping into a formal academy to be refined. As Paul Pogba, who grew up in a banlieue, said, "There is only football. Whether at school or in the neighborhood, everyone will play football. And that helps people not to stay in the streets doing nothing or doing stupid things." A few players who grew up in these situations include Koulibaly, Umtiti, Fekir, Mbappe, Kanté, Pogba, and Zinedine Zidane. Perhaps one of the final important factors to list is the late-stage development, after players have graduated from academies, Clairefontaine, and the football schools. French football takes its reserve teams extremely seriously. In fact, all professional teams are eligible to have their reserve teams as part of the Football League, meaning that young players early on can get a taste of competitive football against players much more experienced than them. From here, they are then usually promoted to their club's first team. So what are the results of all this? Looking at a timeline, the success is undeniable. Before 1970, France rarely qualified for major tournaments and had yet to win one. In 1973, the first national academy is introduced and academies are made compulsory for clubs. Almost 10 years later, France finished 4th at the World Cup. In 1988, Clairefontaine is opened, soon followed by 13 other France football supervised elite academies. And 10 years after that, France are world champions for the first time, followed immediately by winning the Euros again and 2 Confederations Cups for good measure. The France Football Federation not only revolutionized youth football in France, but basically changed the way youth is developed around Europe, with many countries following in their footsteps. They have continued to produce great players and have shown no signs of slowing down. But what do you make of this system? Drop it down below.
And if you want even more content whilst helping to support the channel, consider checking out my Patreon at patreon.com/footballmadesimple. You'll get early access to videos, exclusive videos, as well as access to the upcoming FMS video podcast. But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.